Hey everybody, what's up? It's the Cinebro here, and welcome to the first part of Retro's 80s month. Well, what can I say about Jim Henson?
Considered to being the king of all puppets, he's created many characters and entertained many people from young and old with his characters from Sesame Street and the Muppets. But Jim Henson wanted to do something very different, and that is the movie that we'll be taking a look at today, which is personally one of my favourite projects done by Jim Henson himself.
What movie am I talking about? I'm of course talking about Jim Henson's 1982 classic, The Dark Crystal. Now, before we get into the Dark Crystal review, it's best for me to put on my nostalgia cap, and I do wish to warn you, there are going to be a few spoilers in this review, so you have been warned. Anyway, on to the review.
In another world, another time, in the Age of Wonder, 1,000 years ago, the land was green and good. That wasn't until the piece of the crystal then later cracked. Soon two new races were created, the villainous and terrifying Skeksis and the wise and gentle Mystics. There is said to be a prophecy that the Gelflings can restore peace. However, the Skeksis didn't like it and just killed every single one of them. Well, except for one, being a young Gelfling boy named Jen. The Mystics soon take Jen to learn the many ways. However, many years later, the Mystic Master would soon lay dying and sends Jen on a quest. However, at that same moment, in the castle of the Skeksis, the villainous Emperor later dies. No sooner that he crumbles into a million pieces. One of the Skeksis, being the Chamberlain, wants to have the role of the Emperor, so he tries to steal the Emperor's staff. However, the general doesn't like this and wants to be Emperor, so they have this big battle of trial by stone, as the general wins and the Chamberlain is exiled. Realizing that Jen is on his way to the castle, the general sends in his evil forces of the Gotham Warriors. Jen soon meets Augra, who owns the piece of the crystal shard, till suddenly and unexpectedly, oh no! Gotham attack! Jen then soon meets another Gelfling by the name of Kira and her pet Fizzgig, as she takes him to the beautiful village of the Podlings, and then, suddenly and unexpectedly, oh no! Another Gotham attack! After escaping, Jen, Kira, and Fizzgig find the ancient ruins of the Gelfling city. That isn't until the Chamberlain shows up and wants to make peace, but they definitely don't take that because he's evil. Jen, Kira, and Fizzgig ride on some Landstriders to make their way to the castle. That isn't until, yet again, another Gotham attack and they're taken prisoners. Jen manages to escape, however, Kira has sort of met her fate. Jen places the crystal shard back into the crystal. The Skeksis and the Mystics come back together as one creature, Kira is resurrected from the dead, and the whole film is done.
Man, that was a lot to go through. So, we finished recapping the whole story and all, so what do I actually think of The Dark Crystal? Well, I just gotta say it, it's my favourite 80s film of them all. To me, The Dark Crystal is not only one of my favourite films from the 80s, but recently it's become one of my favourite films of all time. The story feels very fresh and new, the puppetry is extremely awesome, and the characters are actually quite likeable. Jen being the main character of the film, although he may not be quite interesting when you see him first, he actually gets really interesting later on in the film. Not only do I find Kira actually quite likeable, but actually quite adorable. And I also gotta be honest, I also think Fizzgig is also quite lovely too. But what about the villains of the film? The villainous Skeksis. While many people actually like the Chamberlain, I actually preferred the General a lot more better. Because he's the main villain of the entire film, and he's just villainously and awesome. With the Ritual Master on his side, I also quite like the Ritual Master. And I'm gonna say it, the Skeksis General is the real villain and the best part of the film. Augra, being one of the main characters of the film, was puppeteered by none other than Jim Henson's best friend, Frank Oz, who also did another character 2 years before playing Yoda in Star Wars. The soundtrack for the film was done by none other than Trevor Jones, and he did a really good job on the soundtrack. It includes such awesome songs such as the Skeksis' Funeral, the Power Ceremony, even Jen's theme is really good. I have been talking about some interesting facts about the Dark Crystal and how it's really good, but were there a few bad things about the film? And that, of course, being that it was beaten at the box office by Steven Spielberg's E.T.
Yeah, I know E.T.'s a good film, but it has the boring old thing that we know of a boy and his friend. In fact, there was an early test screening, and turns out people didn't really like it, mainly because the original plot was too confusing, and the Skeksis had a different language which no one could understand. And so Jim later refixed up the film, and it was perfect. And then later, a few years later, with the help of David Bowie, he would soon later create the one and only other 80s classic, Labyrinth. Overall, The Dark Crystal is a must-watch for anyone, either a Muppet fan or just a moviegoer. So my advice is to check it out. And also, this film deserves the glorious 10 out of 10. And it's also been heard that Netflix is making a new Dark Crystal prequel series, and I'm very excited to see it when it comes out.
And so that's my review of The Dark Crystal. So, join me in part 2 of 80s Month as we take a look at one movie that was done in the name of science. Weird science to be, in fact. So, until next time, this is the Cinebro signing off.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to check out more awesome things on the Isaac Films YouTube channel.